a couple people actually from the department. And then we'll have a break, let's see, around 7:40 for about 10 minutes. And then after that, we'll have Parks and Rec come on and talk about what they're up to. So there you go. Thanks, Casey.
Thanks, everybody, and thank you so much for being part of the Local Government Academy. My name is Macy McPherson. I'm the Communications Specialist for the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. And tonight, you're going to hear from Ellen Buchanan, the Director of the Department, as well as Ruth Reinken, who's one of our board members. Before we officially get started, we have a couple questions for you and a fun get-going activity for you. So, my first question, raise your hand if you have heard of urban renewal districts. All right, so go ahead, thank you. And now, raise your hand if you think you live in an urban renewal district. We have one person. Okay, great. Thank you. I looked at everybody's addresses, and I counted out of the 43 people that applied, 4 were in urban renewal districts. So, just kind of interesting to think about. So we're going to pass out a fun little true-false quiz for you to fill out right now. You can put you can either check true or false by by each of these 3 statements, and at the end we will see if you learned anything from the presentation or if you have questions. We're calling this Mythbusters. So these are 3 myths or truths we happen to hear in the community. It's going to be up to you to decide if you think it's true or false. So we're going to pass these around, and then I'm going to have you all pass them forward to this part of the room, and I'm going to tally them up while Ellen is talking.
So I'm Ellen Buchanan. I am the Director of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. Thanks all for being here, and thanks for being interested in how local government works. Is that better? You almost have to eat these things. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to try to quickly go through an overview of kind of what MRA does, what tax increment is, how it works, and where it's applied in Missoula. And try to give you folks an overview of kind of what we spend all our time doing. And with that, so we're the MRA. So the agency was created in 1978, shortly after the state passed the laws that allowed urban renewal districts to exist and tax increment financing to be used in the state. It operates, there's very specific state laws about how districts are created, about how they're governed, and this agency functions under that statute in state law. And basically, the purpose of this is to create partnerships and to invest in underperforming areas in the city to improve economic vitality and really encourage investment in these districts from private funding sources. So our agency is created by the council. And as such, we are a component unit of the city. We work for the City of Missoula. A lot of people think that MRA is separate from the city. We're not. Our paycheck's signed by the mayor, just like everybody else that works for the City of Missoula. But we do have our own board, and we do have some autonomy that's been delegated by the City Council in that structure of governance. We have a 5-member board, and we'll talk about how that board functions in a few minutes. Ruth Reinke, one of our board members, is here to kind of address how the board deliberates and acts on proposals that come before them. And in the council, there are a lot of very specific things that are set out in state law that tax increment can be used for. And a lot of those things are things like basic infrastructure, public infrastructure, improvements in the public right-of-way, removal of blight. Most of those approvals have been delegated to the MRA board by the City Council, and that it's been that way from the beginning, from 78 until today. So obviously it's working pretty well. But there are a number of things that only the council can approve. So when we're asked to create an urban renewal district, that may be a request that comes from council, it may be a request that comes from people who live in a certain area or have businesses in a certain area. It may be initiated by staff when we recognize a need. But we have to carry out certain things that are prescribed in state law, and city council has to approve those things. So they tell us, go find blight, go see if there is blight that meets the state statutes in this area. We do that, we bring it back to the city council, they say, yes, we agree there's blight. Now, go write an urban renewal plan for the district and explain how you're going to address those factors. That too then goes to the planning board to make sure it's in compliance with the city's growth policies, and then goes back to city council for adoption, but not before every property owner in that district has been notified by certified mail that we're contemplating creating this district, and we hold a public hearing, and there are usually a number of public meetings associated with it. But at the end of the day, city council has to approve the creation and any modifications to the district. We often have to go back in and modify a plan, because when you create that plan, you may not know what's going to happen 10 years down the road, and there may be an opportunity that comes along that you have to modify the plan to accommodate. And that's an action of the city council. If we issue debt to do larger, more complex projects, city council has to approve that. If we want to purchase land for land banking, for housing, or for parks, or for any number of other reasons, that has to be approved by city council. MRA cannot own land, we can only pay for it on behalf of the city. And at the end of the day, the city council approves our budget every year, just like they do all the other departments. So there's a lot of interaction between the city council and the MRA board that goes on all the time, especially as we're kind of in a period where the easy stuff's been done. And most of our projects are pretty complicated and require involvement by our elected officials to make sure we're doing the right things that they want to see happen. I'm going to turn it over to Ruth to talk a little bit about the board and how the board functions.
Hi, my name is Ruth Reinking. Thank you for being here. As Ellen mentioned, we are a 5-member board, and that is state law. So we can't have 7 members or additional members. We are limited to 5 members. They are appointed by the mayor and approved by city council. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we make decisions on the proposals that come to us. So we've developed some criteria over the years to achieve the 2 goals that the MRA has. And I want to emphasize this. Ellen briefly touched on it. We do have 2 goals. One is the elimination of blight, and one is economic development. And so we do look for that. We look for the economic stimulus that a project might bring. We generally would like a 1 to 10 private to public investment in those projects, but we may vary that if there's a compelling public reason to do it or benefit for the public. We look at whether the project generates taxes and what the estimated amount of those taxes might be, but we also are aware that not everything that we invest in is going to generate taxes. Like I don't know if you picked up a brochure for the MRA, miles of trails and sidewalks that get improved in those urban renewal districts. And that money does not have to come out of the general fund. Or the number of units of affordable housing that we've helped to build. Again, doesn't have to come out of the general fund. You should take a look at some of the achievements that we've had, and they're in the brochures, and I hope you pick one up. Maybe it's in your binders, I don't know. I also wanted to just mention, and we do have more information on this if you're interested in it, that we have helped a lot of small businesses here in Montana while we don't pay for, say, the tub shower combos at the Merck, and we don't pay for the boats at Blackfoot River Outfitters, but we help with the curbs and access to those small businesses like Blackfoot River Outfitters on Russell, or Solar Plexus on Stevens, or Bridge Pizza out on 93. Some of those projects wouldn't happen if they didn't have help from the MRA. We also have a new program for workforce housing, that will cover some bricks and mortar. That's new. I'm excited to see how that works out. And if you want more information on that, Annie can provide it. I also wanted to talk a little bit more about elimination of blight. Blight is not just appearance. There are 15 definitions of blight in state law for urban renewal districts, and most of them are related to function. Things like the sanitation or street layout, open spaces and safety, things that constitute an economic or social liability that impair the sound growth of the city. When we look at these projects, we make sure that they all comply with the various policies that the city has. Urban renewal plan that Ellen mentioned, but also the growth policy, the housing policy, the zero waste policy, the design guidelines, and any other policies that are approved by city council. We also do look at, what kind of financial assistance does the project have? Is it feasible? Does the developer have the ability to perform and complete that on a timely basis? Those are kind of our reality checks to minimize risk. That's it, short and sweet. Anybody have any questions for me?
What kind of annual budget do you have to do all these projects? Like a ballpark?
I am going to turn this over to Ellen because I know that she'll have a graph here that explains, first of all, how we get the funding and what the tax increment is, and then she's got slides that will tell you the general amount.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't give you the aggregate amount. We have 6 different urban renewal districts, and they each have different amounts of available revenue in them, but it's millions of dollars. I mean, when you hear that, that's true. Because we've been successful in these districts. And I'm going to skip through some of these slides because we've already kind of talked about them. But one of the things I want to touch on here is what TIF can be used for and what it can't be used for. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in the community about how we can legally use these funds. So we can invest in public infrastructure. That's our bread and butter all day long. And we have to invest the money inside the urban renewal districts. It can't go past those boundaries, except under extraordinary circumstances where connectivity is important for the development in the district. We can invest in publicly owned buildings up until the 2023 session of the legislature. That was the only bricks and mortar investment we could make in buildings, was in publicly owned buildings. Now we have the workforce housing, which the state defined in the 23 session of the legislature. They defined it as infrastructure. So we can spend money on that, on workforce housing, just like we can on sidewalks and parks and trails and curbs and gutter. And we also pay for a lot of master planning work, which resulted in a lot of good development and predictability for investors and developers. Some of the things that we can't spend money, the TIF funding on, is things like staff salaries, city staff salaries. We hear over and over again, you shouldn't be using TIF funds to build XYZ, you should be paying police salaries. Or you should be, paying general fund salaries with that money instead of using it to build parks and build trails and those sorts of things. Well, we simply can't do that. It's not allowed by law. And we can't invest in private buildings. We can't, as Bruce pointed out, we can't build the tub shower or pay for the tub shower accommodations in the new hotel down the street. And I think there's a general misunderstanding about how the funding is used on a broad basis. Ruth alluded to this is just a real quick graphic, but some of the public investments that have been made with TIF since its inception, MRA's inception in '78, 94 acres of parkland improved, 8 miles of trails, 17 miles of sidewalks. And the one that's kind of the outlier here, all of these are public infrastructure investments, but the outlier here is the housing units. And housing is, you can't have a conversation in Missoula today without coming down to housing. And we have been a part of bringing over almost 2,500 units of housing into the market in Missoula over the history, and I think that's going to explode now that we can invest in workforce housing. And a lot of that housing has been income qualified housing, or what we refer to as affordable housing. projects like Bellagio that just came online, like Equinox and Solstice. We've supported all of those over the years. Every income qualified housing project that's in an urban renewal district has TIF funds in it today. So here's how TIF works. You've got an area that's declining or not carrying its weight in terms of the taxable values and the revenue that it's generating. There are a number of different ways we can be asked to create a district. Like I said earlier, it can be business or property owners, it can be city council, it can be residents, or self-initiated. We go through the process with council that I talked about earlier, and they agree to create an urban renewal district. Well, the year that district is created is called the base year. Whatever the property taxes are going to the taxing jurisdictions in that year are frozen, and they continue to go to the taxing jurisdictions. We can't touch that money. If a building comes down in the district in order to build a better, newer, more appropriate building, the value of that building that came down that hole has to be filled back up before we start building increment. So if it's $1 million in property taxes when the district is created, they're still getting $1 million in property taxes when the district ends. The big difference is that all of the increment from new development and new investment, it goes into a special fund that can only be spent in that district, and when the district sunsets, all of that additional revenue goes to the taxing jurisdictions, to the cities, to the schools, to the county, Mountain Line, all the other taxing jurisdictions that in the state. And so when the downtown district, for instance, sunsetted in 2005, the city alone realized almost $500,000 in new tax revenue that was built up because of the investments of TIF in that district. And this is just kind of a graph that shows you that, just because you create an urban renewal district, you don't suddenly have tax increment. It takes time to build up. It takes, you can spend as long as 10 to 12 years before you have significant revenue to do projects of any size. This happens to be Urban Renewal District 3, which is the Brooks Corridor. And it had some significant projects on the horizon when the district was created. But when I came here in 2004, the revenues in that district were about $300,000 a year. Now they're several million because of the investment that's been made. I'm going to talk just real quickly about the downtown, because it really is kind of the poster child for what urban renewal and urban redevelopment can do. When this district was created in 1978, it was the highest crime rate in the city. It was the highest number of fires in the city. There were empty buildings all up and down Higgins and Front and Main. Like most of the downtowns in the country, it had been stripped of everything that used to be there by suburban sprawl. And most of that went to Midtown in the form of the mall and some of the strip commercial centers. By the time the district ended in 2005, what we found at the end when we kind of did a recap is that over $20 million in TIF money had been reinvested in the downtown, and it had leveraged over $200 million in other investment. A lot of that private, some of it federal money, some of it state money that we could provide the match for. That's why we have the robust trail system that we have along the river today, is because of that downtown district. So it's a wonderful success story, and we've got the downtown to show for it. I think we've got some of the brochures that we did when the downtown sunsetted, if you want to pick them up. We have 6 urban renewal districts. This is an aggregate map of all of them and their relationship. The one thing they have in common is they're all in the urban core. Other than that, they are all vastly different from each other. Now I'm going to run through really quickly some of what the districts basically consist of. UR2 is the oldest functioning district right now. It was created in 1991, and we've seen an increase in taxable value in that district of over $6 million. It will sunset in 6 years. Some of the main projects that we're working on there are making sure we have the whole water system in place to allow development to happen once we're not around to help bring it on. We're working on completing the entire network, sidewalk network in that district. If you look south of the river, you see new sidewalks all over the place. Those were all built with TIF at 100% by TIF. They weren't, no contribution from the property owners. And one of the main reasons for that is that our board and our staff are really sensitive to trying to stem gentrification. And once you put the cost of these new improvements on that property, you price people out of those houses, and they have to go elsewhere. We are in the process of designing lighting for the entire Bitterroot Trail from downtown all the way to Reserve Street, so a portion of that comes through this district. We're working with MRL to see if we can convert the railroad trestle in a way that it becomes a functioning part of the Bitterroot Trail, and hopefully we'll be successful with that. And we've got some river and riverbank improvements that are goals for that district before it ends. And of course, housing. Housing is a priority in every district we have. Okay, Macy, it doesn't matter which button I push, it's going in the same direction. Sorry. So, District 3 is basically Midtown. It's the Brooks Corridor. It was created in 2000, and the Midtown's hot right now. We're seeing a lot of investment down there. We're seeing a lot of projects that are churning around. There's a whole lot of opportunity there. If you go up to the M, it's pretty easy to pick out Urban Renewal District 3 because it's gray. There's almost no green there, which to me just says development potential. Since it was created, the increase in taxable value there has been $8.8 million, so it's significant. And it sunsets in 2040, so we're already planning how we're going to make our exit from that district, because that sounds like a long ways off until you start talking about redevelopment projects that take 10 years, 15 years to do. So, you know, our focus is there. We've already built out the sidewalk network everywhere that we have the ability to build a sidewalk. The main project that we're working on in this district, which isn't on the slide because we didn't put it on there for some reason, is we have been working for a number of years to try to transform Brooks. This district has a brand new Midtown master plan that was adopted by the city last year, late last year. The spine of that is of course Brooks, and what we're working on is fixed route transit and a transit-oriented development corridor up and down through there that will allow for denser development, job creation, all those things that you typically see on a fixed transit corridor. It's a really ambitious project, but we think we have a good shot at significant federal funding. We applied for and were awarded an $850,000 planning grant by the federal government under the RAISE program, and none of us expected to have that fully funded. I mean, the signal to me is that this is in line with this current administration's values. Mayor Pete knows about this project. He's the head of the Department of Transportation. So that's where probably the majority of our efforts are going there. And then we've got other larger properties that we're trying to help develop that have not developed yet or have developed in a way that's not the highest and best use. Front Street is downtown. That was in the original downtown urban renewal district, and it's an area that really didn't see the kind of investment that other parts of downtown saw, and we had an opportunity when First Interstate Bank decided that they needed to do something with their old existing bank, and the options were build back in downtown where there had always been a bank in the entire history of Missoula, or go out and build a greenfield development somewhere out off of Reserve. They came to the city and they said, we'd like to stay where we are. We'd like to do the right thing and build for more than our needs. We would like to build a 6 or a 9 story Class A office building, and there was no Class A office space in downtown at that time. But we can't do it if we don't have parking. And Missoula has always had to have TIF as a funding source to build public parking structures. We created this district. First Interstate built their bank. We built Park Place. The taxes just from First Interstate Bank were enough to service the debt that MRA took on for our portion of that parking structure. And now look at Front Street, because we have that. And look at what's happened in that part of downtown Missoula, because that parking structure is there. I mean, that's the power of TIF. You've got student housing, you've got you've got 3 new hotels, you've got a brewery, you've got a new library that was able to be under park. We have an entire block that was donated to the city where the old library is that we can develop however we want to. So it's been an amazing catalyst project for us. So, you know, our emphasis down there right now is getting the old library block redeveloped, and it's also housing opportunities. There are a lot of housing opportunities along the river around Kiwanis Park that we're seeing interest in investment in for denser housing. Riverfront Triangle, that's the hole in the ground with the most expensive parking lot in the state of Montana, orange in front. We've been trying for 3 decades to redevelop that. The city owns 3 acres there where the old Fox Theater sat. We've worked with development groups after development groups to try to stimulate development there, and for one reason or another, they fell through. We're working with two different groups right now who have a very high interest level in the city-owned 3 acres. And one of them has an emphasis on housing, so we're pretty excited about that. But we've been excited before. When the development agreements are signed and the dirt starts turning, then we'll feel a whole lot better about it. But this is amazing potential. We just have never been able to bring it to fruition. North Reserve Scott Street is between Scott Street and North Reserve Street, Broadway, and the interstate. It's an interesting district because a lot of it, anything in white in that district, is in the county. So as properties want to take advantage of tax increment, they annex into the city, and then the district is amended and they're brought into the district. Something we did when Consumer Direct built their office building out there. Diversified Plastics took advantage of that last year, and we'll be back to take, they're adding square footage, they're adding really good manufacturing jobs there. And it's not often we get to use TIF for manufacturing jobs, so that's especially exciting. That district has increased in taxable value since 2014 by almost $3 million. And the other project there that is really important and is what we're calling the Rivara project. We partnered as a city with a group who are not typical developers, but have the same values as the city has in terms of what they want to put there. And what we have ended up with is 9 acres that MRA bought several years ago. It's half of what we bought. It will be developed as 3 acres will be on a community land trust. It'll be for sale housing, 89 units, combination of townhomes and condominiums. And 51% of those will be income qualified workforce housing. That's middle class housing. That's teachers, that's entry-level firefighters, that's, those are the folks we want to house in our community that right now cannot buy houses. The lower half of it, or 2/3 of it, will be a market rate project that will include probably 225 or so apartments and a large amount of mixed use. They're talking with small grocers. One of the obligations they have to the city is they have to provide child care space. So they've got a number of maker space. Those sorts of things will go in there. We will probably break ground on the infrastructure for that within the next month. And it's been a long haul. It's another one of those easy projects. Last, the Hellgate District was created in 2014. The catalyst for that was the decision by the university to build Missoula College. out there. We thought that would probably be a catalyst and that there could be some things that TIF could do to enhance development along that corridor. It's not the loveliest gateway into Missoula coming from the east. And frankly, nothing has changed out there since 2014. We've seen a little bit of increase in value, but that's just appreciation. I don't know that there's been much of anything other than some of the renovations that were done at Eastgate Shopping Center. So our focus out there is to try to drum up development. And there's an ambitious plan the university is working on, Montec's working on it, may bear some fruit at some point. And I'm going to close with this slide. This is something we put together for the last session of the legislature that I think shocked me graphically in a lot of ways. I mean, you hear all the time that these projects would happen even if there wasn't TIF and even if there wasn't an urban renewal district. This is downtown. South of Broadway is in the Front Street District, in the Riverfront Triangle District, and partly in the Hellgate District. And north of Broadway is not in an urban renewal district. So since 2007, there's been one significant project north of Broadway, and that's the Garland Office Building. During that same time period, you've got AC Hotel, Wynn Hotel, Merck, the library, Lee Gordon Housing, Rome Student Housing, the Vassar Street Housing, First Interstate Bank, the Union Block Historic Restoration, Stockman Bank. All of those were catalyzed because there was TIF there. So the property values, the taxable value has increased just amazingly more than what's gone on north of Broadway. So you just can't say that TIF didn't have a part in that. There's tax increment money in every one of those projects. Yes?
What was the name of the project that was north of Broadway?
Garlington, Lauren Robinson's office building.
Thank you.
And I think with that, I'm going to close and. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the sunsetting of the districts and if it was to be extended and how that was decided?
So when a district is created, it has a 15-year life. If you issue debt within that 15 years, the district can extend to the length of that bond issue. So technically, the longest bond issue you can issue in a tax increment district or an urban renewal district is 25 years. So technically, if you issued a 25-year bond in year 15, you can have 40 years of life in the district. The downtown district did not last that long. The bonds that were issued, and there was only one bond issue, I think, in that district, and it was to build Central Park, and it was a 15-year bond as opposed to 25. So there's a hard stop on the districts. But you're almost invariably past that 15-year mark before you've got enough revenue coming in to do these big projects that really do serve as economic stimulus. I mean, economic development is the long view. It doesn't happen quickly. So, and when you sunset a district, it has an end point, and all the revenues that are in that district then go to the taxing jurisdictions. Yeah.
Thanks for explaining all this. I saw that sidewalk, kind of finishing sidewalks and getting basic infrastructure in some neighborhoods is part of the focus. As a former resident of Franklin and the Fort, a lot of our, you know where I'm going.
I
How do we, what's the process of getting those, like higher priority, or like how do you prioritize projects, I guess? How do we get those, for our limited mobility neighbors and people who don't have the great vision to see at night without the lampposts?
Well, this is the reality check answer. Primarily residential areas that are going to experience primarily residential developments don't generate the kind of revenue that you need to do these infrastructure projects. Very, very challenging. Commercial is taxed much higher than residential. And so if there's a way to combine a primarily residential area with an area where there's the potential for commercial development, then the commercial development carries the day. And we're criticized all the time for investing in things like the Merck Hotel or the AC, or those guys pay the freight. I mean, they're the ones that are paying for the trails and the parks and the sidewalks and water main extensions. We're criticized for, assisting banks. That's probably our best return on investment because of the way that the Department of Revenue taxes banks. But when you've got a neighborhood that is purely residential and likely to stay that way, I don't know how, I have no idea how long it would take to get a big enough pool of money to build a park, for instance. Because that's another thing that's missing in Franklin and the north side. And it's the tax structure. So, and one of the things that was a surprise to me when I came here is that apartment buildings are taxed as residential. Every one of them is a business. But they're taxed at a residential rate because that lobby group has the strength to keep that like that. So we've got a student housing project on Front Street with almost 500 beds that's taxed just like their house is taxed. I think it's a business. Yeah.
What is the process for a business to apply for financing?
We've got it's really pretty simple. We've got all of our application forms and all of our program descriptions are on our website. Probably all of the banks, the architects, the engineers in town are familiar with what we do, and the realtors. And that's where most of our referrals come from. It's a pretty simple application. It requires some thought and some detail. It requires some validity. But we meet with a potential applicant. We go through the project. We let them know what might be eligible, what might not be eligible. We will work with them through the application process, which is once again not complicated or lengthy. Staff makes a recommendation to the board. Once the board acts on it, they know they've got their funding, and we enter into development agreements, which is a contract that says you will do this and we will reimburse you. And that's a key thing with the way we do business is that almost all of our programs are reimbursement at the end of the project once you have the certificate of occupancy. That way we don't go in up front and pay somebody to have taken the building down and then have the project fail and nothing comes out of the ground. So we protect the public dollars by doing it that way. Yes, sir.
Out by the VA, there's a big, huge apartment complex. Is that part of MRA?
No, we don't go out that far.
I had a question about the riverfront triangle development that you talked about earlier. Mostly I was just curious about why you think there's kind of been a lack of development in that one.
Well, it's a really tough site. Number one, there's no back door on that site. You've got street, river. And every project has its own reason for failure, right? But for the pandemic, we'd have a hotel sitting there with an entertainment center attached to it. That project was going in for building permitting when the world shut down. And the finances were there to do it. You can't control it. Every one of the proposals has its own story. Yes.
I just, a clarification, I suppose. The difference between workforce housing that you're allowed to fund now and what you were allowed to fund before is the workforce housing not income driven?
I'm sorry, is workforce housing what?
Is it not income based?
Yes.
Okay.
But what happened was...
Or income qualified, rather.
Right.
Yeah.
We never had the ability to invest in non-publicly owned housing until workforce housing was included in the definition of infrastructure. Workforce housing generally across the country is 60 or 80% of area median income to 120%. Some communities, it's up to 150 or 170% because that's the economics of that community. State law named it infrastructure, but they didn't define it. So we were using the definition of 80 to 120 as we were trying to figure out how to create a program where we could actually disperse some of the funds. And then in this past session of the legislature, there was a bill that actually defined workforce housing as 60 to 140. So,
I know you said every district has its own story, and there's obviously very good reasons why each one may succeed or fail, but has there over the 45 years been any sort of comprehensive, has anyone identified any sort of patterns as to what makes something succeed, as to what makes something fail? Because it seems like some of these are kind of just a mixed bag, and some of them take them out, some of them aren't, and they sure fill some line. Is that correct?
so you're asking if there are common denominators
Yes.
with success and failure? Yeah, I think there probably are some, but I do think that every district's needs and just, you know, the general makeup is very different from others. Opportunities. Some districts have a ton of opportunity. That North Reserve Scott Street district, my heavens, you know, most of that is underutilized or could be a more appropriate development. Front Street, maybe not so much. You've got a lot of stuff there that is what you want. I think that the one common denominator we see is that once it's in an urban renewal district, and particularly if we go through some sort of an adopted master planning process like we've just done with Midtown and like we did with downtown, investors and developers have predictability, and they will come and they will invest in those areas. I don't think I think the Merck would still be sitting empty today if we hadn't done the downtown master plan, which finally got somebody to buy that building and had the urban renewal district around it. Because it could not be redeveloped. It's strictly private money. And that is a common denominator. I mean, a lot of these bigger developments are not going to be able to reach their full potential unless there is that public subsidy. And it may be just in the form of doing sidewalks, or upsizing a water line, or a sewer line. But if we want to grow up and not sprawl, we have to have the utilities in place to support that growth. And I mean, one of the things, and this is real simplistic, but downtown Missoula, every alley is full of power lines. You can't go above 2 stories in most cases without getting rid of those power lines because you can't get the code required clearances to go up to a 3 or 4 or 5 story building. So, and that's not cheap undergrounding those power lines, but that's one of the main things that we've spent TIF money on, where we see whether it's Stockman Bank or the AC or the Merck or First Interstate, Missoula Art Museum, all of them ran into those issues. And that's just a real simple thing.
We have 10 minutes left, yeah, so I was going to go through our little.
Thank you, Rob.
Oh, we had another question. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I just have a question about, so I live in a rural district, and I was looking at my tax bill, and over 70% of my tax bill goes to URD2. But then I was looking at like what a typical tax bill would be like. So we pay less than 5% into the City of Missoula general fund. We pay about 6% into local schools, while other people in Missoula who are not in URDs pay about 30% of their bill goes to local schools, 32% goes to the City of Missoula. There's some other categories too, but that's just an example. So I'm just wondering, like, how is that tax revenue made up for like basic services, for like schools and police and fire and things like that, when people who live in urban renewal districts are not paying what like other people are paying?
So what you just described is the bane of our existence every year when taxpayers come out. This is the way the county chooses to deal with urban renewal districts. And what they do is they take the amount of the increment and they spread it over all the properties in that district. It has nothing to do with whether or not you've done any improvements on your house or your business or any, it's spread across the whole district and it's line item on your bill. And what we've done here, if you look at, and then they just run the percentages, they're just numbers, but that doesn't say that only that many dollars of yours go to the school districts. They still get their number of mills from the taxes that are created. But we found 2 properties, almost identical, almost the same value. One's in an urban renewal district, one is not. One has that line item on there for that urban renewal district, the other one doesn't. And their taxes are within a few dollars of each other.
Yeah,
It
my
does not
question
add
is
that to the
about,
tax.
like, that I'm paying too much in taxes. It's more like, well, what about like most people, or people who are not in an urban renewal district are paying 30% of their bill goes to schools. Well, only 6.4% of my bill goes to schools. So how is that being made up to the local schools, their budget?
Well, I mean, the schools is a kind of a unique animal because what they can have in revenue is capped because of the School Equalization Act that equalize schools across the state. So, for instance, the schools, Missoula County Public Schools just got a large infusion, or is getting this year, a large infusion of TIF money because there was what was called a remittance. That we remitted out of the districts collectively X dollars to the city to balance the budget. But what that does is that every other taxing jurisdiction gets a proportional share. So only we get 30 cents on the dollar is what it comes down to as the city of Missoula. Missoula County Public Schools probably got in excess of $1 million in that remittance. They can't use it for the schools. They either have to lower their bills or they have to send it to the state. But they cannot use it for operating their schools. They can't use it for this deficit that they're facing right now in their budget coming up. And that's a hard thing to explain to people and to understand. But the law says that they have 2 options.
What about like City of Missoula general fund? Like I'm paying 4.9%, and a typical tax bill, according to the Missoula County website, is 32.4% is going to the City of Missoula. So like I know like fire needs more tax, the fire department needs more tax revenue right now. Like where is that coming? Like where is the 20%? I'm just one property owner, so I guess I'm just wondering, like, how is that made up for these basic services?
Well, I think it's made up by the fact that money is being reinvested in those districts and is increasing the taxable value in those districts, but it's delayed in terms of the cities, the counties, and the schools getting that money until the district sunsets. I mean, it's a decision that the governing body makes that this is important. And I would argue that if the first downtown urban renewal district had not been created in the late 70s, we wouldn't have the downtown we have today, and we would not have the tax base that we have in downtown today. And that goes on and on and on and on. So it's delayed gratification, if you will. But you're right, it's, they're getting less of that because they've chosen to have that portion of the taxes reinvested back in that district to build it up. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Great questions. So I know you guys are just about to a break, and we really appreciate. We want to give you a lot of time to ask questions, and Ruth is also here to continue to answer questions, and then Annie Gorski over here is the deputy director who is heading up our workforce housing program. So if you have questions during your break and you want to come chat with Annie. But just before we let you guys go, we want to go through our true and false and see what's a myth and what's not, and see if you've maybe changed your mind. So I'm going to hand it over to Annie.
Thanks, everybody. It's great to hear all your awesome questions. And judging from your questions, I think you are all paying really good attention, so you will imagine getting 100% on this test. The first one, the Mythbusters, is does MRA primarily give money to private corporations instead of public improvements? True or false? Raise your hand if you think that's true. Awesome. Okay, maybe. The answer there is false, based on, we shared a lot of examples tonight about investments in public improvements, sidewalks in lower income neighborhoods, housing, supporting small businesses. I just looked in our annual report, and if you all want to take one on your way out tonight, in fiscal year 2023, so the previous fiscal year, our board approved investment in 30 different projects. And let's see, 26 of those were anything other than supporting an infrastructure in front of a business. So the majority of those were housing, parks, public buildings, environmental remediation to support public sites, public amenities, trails, etc., planning studies, master plans. So just that is, again, sounds like that was conveyed tonight. The next on the true false is MRA should fund the salaries of police and fire department staff instead of funding projects to save taxpayer money. Who thinks that's true? Okay, you're on your, well, it is false because state law says we cannot invest in salaries for police and fire. The majority of the authority we get from state law is for capital projects, permanent improvements. The exception being we are able to fund salaries, administration, salaries for all of us to administer these urban renewal districts and the projects within them. Yes?
So, I have a question. We understand that they already can fund salaries and so forth. Could they fund equipment like in a fire truck?
Yes. If that was located, if the fire station, for example, were located in an urban renewal district.
So everything that the MRA is giving money to has to be in that urban renewal district?
Correct.
The rest of us just get left out.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. The investments per state law have to be made within the boundaries of those 6 districts that we have right now. Yes.
So I will say that one of the things we did this year for this budget season that we're into now is that we ran numbers about the numbers of calls by police and fire in the various districts, and we figured out what percentage that was of the debt service that they have on fire equipment, police equipment, and we paid that percentage to the city. So those police cars and fire trucks benefit the entire city, but we paid for roughly a third of the debt service because roughly a third of the calls for both of them were in the urban renewal districts. So there are creative ways that you can do that, but we can't pay to build a fire station that's west of Reserve Street or for salaries.
Okay. I don't know, do we have a prize for the winners? We have a lot of winners here tonight. The last question. The projects in urban renewal districts would have happened regardless of whether or not they received tax increment financing. True?
Trick question.
Trick question. Save that for the end. The majority of them likely would not have happened. The Sawmill District in Urban Renewal District 2, right, a brownfield site, former industrial site, likely would not be the vital neighborhood that we have today, but for urban renewal, investment in infrastructure and supporting the environmental cleanup. Ellen talked about the Front Street Urban Renewal District in downtown, another example. And then the last piece I would say about in terms of other projects that may have happened, they likely wouldn't have happened in their current form. Right? Because they're requesting tax increment financing, they need to meet some requirements of our program, and one of those is that typically we ask that they meet design excellence standards. So those buildings are more beautiful and more. The design is an important piece. If we are funding, even if we're just funding sidewalks in front of the building, we ask that the building meet those design excellent standards. The other piece is deconstruction. And so we have a policy that if there is a request for removal of a building, that the entity request or include deconstruction. And so that means, again, we're saving significant building materials from going to the landfill as part of this as well. And so, again, and early on when developers start talking to us about these projects, we focus in on the public benefit, right? So maybe the look and the feel of the building is likely more beautiful and more aesthetic. We also ask that they think about used durable materials. So you're not going to see metal-sided buildings funded with in an urban renewal district where we were funding the sidewalks or the public infrastructure in front. It's steel, wood, and durability as well. So, thank you.
And sustainable.
And sustainable.
Sustainable materials and alternative energy sources, those sorts of things. We encourage better insulation, better windows, solar.
I think that concludes our piece, and we'll turn it over to you. Thank you all.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. We'll take a 10-minute break. Feel free to grab some snacks, head to the restroom, or ask any questions, and then we'll be back with Parks and Recreation. Hello. Okay. All right, we're going to get started with the Parks and Recreation portion. All right, and also, yeah, let us know still about mic level. I turned this off, but it turned on again, so sorry about that. All right, well, I will hand it over to Donna Gottler.
Thanks, Galena. Good evening, everybody. My name is Donna Gottler. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation Department. I've been with the department since 1991 and the Director since 2002. And I want to introduce to you the Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation, Ryan Applegate. We're going to tag team this a little bit. We do have an activity for you, so we've kept our presentation a little brief. We find that many of you do visit your parks, trails, open space, recreation facilities, and programs. And so we're going to talk more about the benefits of those and how we operationalize the work. And then we hope to get into some long-range planning with you, so you will be the first to participate in the PROST, Park, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Planning. And hopefully you can help advise us on some questions we should be asking the community. So to start off, I'm assuming you're very familiar with the city's strategic goals and the various lenses. And we also have a Parks and Recreation Board, and the mission of the Parks Department is to provide places, programs, and services essential to our quality of life, reflects our community values, fosters a sense of place, and develops and preserves infrastructure and lands critical to human and environmental health. I share that because if you think about parks and recreation, many of you live in neighborhoods that are literally named for a park in your neighborhood. We find through growth policy and other things, other planning processes in the city, that what people care about in Missoula is their place. The mountains, the streams, the recreational opportunities, the arts, the culture, community engagement. And in fact, they even say parks and recreation, downtown Missoula, and the University of Montana. So by and large, the residents of Missoula significantly have a love affair, if you will, with their open spaces and easy access to recreation. The city does have 4 strategic goals around organizational excellence, and certainly in any large organization, any size organization, your employees are your greatest resource. Economic health, which we know that people thrive when they can live healthy lifestyles, have access to education, and good environments, good jobs and housing. Community safety, health and well-being. Parks and recreation, we spend a lot of our time in the world of prevention of worst cause, giving children an opportunity to grow up in a healthy environment, learning good skills. We mentor thousands of young people in their first jobs. have a variety of our facilities. And then, of course, community design and livability. The benefits of parks and recreation are plentiful. They include environmental benefits. So if you think about the trees in the urban forest, the soils in the parks, those are our most significant carbon sequestration tools that we could have. Those landscapes and trees are cleaning our air, protecting our water, especially during stormwater events. They preserve pavement, they keep our environment cooler as things get hotter. And so there's huge environmental benefits. Many of your parks are along riverways and waterways, and so we're protecting the fisheries and all of the habitat that goes with that. And if you think about the hillsides, you got the habitat for larger wildlife all the way down to amphibians and insects and pollinators. And so parks plays an important role in that environment. They also play a role in health. So if you think about the health of your own members of your household, it is directly related, of course, to what we consume, what our tree canopy looks like, our access to trails and sidewalks, our physical activities levels. And so in parks, we partner with Garden City Harvest and we grow vegetables. We have access to those facilities so you can choose to walk or bike and use transit or live an active lifestyle. I often talk about the social benefits of parks. It's in parks. That's our community neighborhood, or our community living room, I should say, or our community dining table. So if you think about going to farmers market and festivals or the Bonner Band concerts or Splash Montana, or gathering your family at a picnic shelter or all playing together, we can only really experience a high quality of life and really high density housing if we have access to some open spaces for that respite and relief. And finally, there's also economic benefits. We know people that live healthy lifestyles have an opportunity to maintain their physical and mental, emotional health, are more likely to have less costs in medical bills, less need for medication, and we also know that jobs in Missoula are both retained and new businesses move here because of their access to recreation. So a lot of what we try and really focus on is how do we prevent bad things from happening and how do we provide the best possible opportunity for success. Much of your health is determined, it's called the social determinants of health, and it's your access to community opportunities like public libraries, public parks, museums. And I'm looking over across the room and noting that our MRA partners are in the room. Those investments, when we talk about investments in blight, have often come out in the forms of trails and sidewalks and parks and trees. And those are things that cause us to be healthier. Did you know that only 20% of your health is determined by the healthcare industry? The rest is what we put in to our communities and into ourselves and into our families. I mentioned the climate benefits, cooling, clean air, clean watersheds, those soils. It was one of my favorite stories from a former council member is the reminder that our parklands, not only do they sequester carbon, clean the air, provide places for people to play and gather, host tournaments and festivals and events for our community to come together, but they're also, in time of emergency, or who knows what our world looks like 40 or 50 years from now, would be some of our best soils for growing vegetables and feeding ourselves. And so investments in those parklands, even if you don't currently use a place like Fort Missoula Regional Park, those are investments in our long-term viability in our region or possible future way of feeding ourselves. And so we like to look at parks in a very long-term, I sometimes even compare, and this might sound crazy, but a lot of people have a hard time understanding the benefit of a tree. Because when you plant a tree, It seems like such a simple effort. They're so small, we don't understand the benefit. Yet when trees get to be 40, 60, and 80 years old, they're providing the greatest possible climate benefits, equity benefits. Did you know that kids who live in green spaces, who grow up in green spaces, are more likely to not need medication, are more likely to successfully solve problems without conflict? So those kinds of investments matter greatly. And the thing is we have to plant those trees today. We have to plan for our future today, just like when we think about raising kids. It's what we do when they're at their very youngest stage that most affects how they'll grow up and how healthy they'll be. I talked a little bit about how services are delivered. Because there's very little that's mandated in parks and recreation. So yes, once the pools are built and open, we are mandated to maintain safe quality water. Absolutely, when staff goes out in the field and are working in right-of-ways, we have to follow OSHA and all those other kinds of regulations. But almost everything that happens in parks is discretionary, meaning you choose to visit, you choose to sign up for a program, people vote to support different referendums, to acquire things like Mount Jumbo, or to care for the river. So almost everything is discretionary in how the funds are used and how they are gathered. And it's a huge quality of life and an investment in ourselves, in our community, and each other. So when we deliver those services, we pay very, very close attention to what do you want? What does the community need? We use surveys, evaluations, we follow up with data and research to see what programs are having impacts, are meeting community needs. We work with citizen planning groups. We definitely use our various plans. So today you're going to learn more about the Park, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails, or PROS plan. It is a issued plan of growth policy. It will help determine the priorities for parks and recreation for the next 10 to 15 years. The last plan was adopted in 2004. They are issued plans of growth policy, so they will provide direction. We use those extensively as staff to deliver the services that you have asked through Parks and Recreation. We also do, listening is important, evaluating programs is important. We learn all kinds of things from all of you every day and each participant in the programs. You'll see in our conservation lands, we do adaptive management, and so we will actually conduct research in the field, studying plants, animals, how people behave, so that we can make good adaptive decisions around that. We do follow and respect the servant leadership style of delivery of services, meaning is the work we're doing helping others? Does it result in a better outcome for our community, for the individuals living in our community, visitors to the programs and facilities? Or does it at least not cause harm to others? We have a number of boards. We have a Parks and Recreation Board that oversees all of the policies and processes for which we deliver services. The City Council definitely determines what the budget is. And then we have a Open Space Advisory Committee, which is advisory to the City Council on acquisition of open space or use of open space bond funds. So we've had an open space bond passed in 1980, 1995, 2006, and 2018. And those are the funds that we as a community use to help define the place we live. Most of those funds have been used to protect river corridors, collect the linear footage that is necessary for trails. It has also been used for many of the hillsides, those areas that in your view shed are protected and often too steep for building. Important to note that there are very few places where parks and housing actually conflict, but there are some areas. Those areas include neighborhood level parks, where you make a decision, do we have a neighborhood park next to high density housing or in neighborhoods so that people have something nearby. One of the goals of the 2004 Master Park Plan is that each resident is within a walking distance of a park. And that really works out well for people with limited mobility, lower income, so that they can access their parks. But those are the kinds of things that our boards are looking at. And when the Open Space Advisory Committee is making decisions for expenditure of those funds, they're looking at an entire plan that was developed through citizen involvement on how to spend those funds. And finally, we have a Conservation Lands Advisory Committee. The Conservation Lands Advisory Committee is actually a subcommittee to the Park and Recreation Board. I think it might be the only ongoing subcommittee to an advisory board. And the reason it was created is because we look at the entire valley as an ecosystem. So if you think about parks and recreation, we are maintaining a majority of your public spaces and lands in the entire valley. So the other way I explain it is anything that's green and you cannot drive on it with a semi and it's public might be parks. We work closely with our board and our staff and of course citizens to determine what is most important. How do we operationalize that? As a staff, we look at kind of a big five in what we call department priorities for implementing your wishes. One, we continue to work to build capacity. One of the things, I was just visiting with Kalina, we have so many neighborhood councils, so many HOAs, we have a record number of nonprofits per our population. And Parks and Recreation is partnering with, I would say, a majority of those nonprofits that work in either environmental or social justice areas. So food delivery systems, conservation, water quality, anything having to do with conservation on the largest scale you can imagine, or anything having to do with service to humans that affects our health. Those are our partners. And then, of course, with each of the neighborhood councils, most of the HOAs, numerous special interest groups. So building capacity is largely done through volunteerism, partnerships, and of course, building that capacity also within our staff. We sometimes, we pride ourselves in customer service to the point that we have many customers who said, gosh, it's so great to call Parks to actually get a human being. And that's really important to us because that's exactly what we do is we serve humans. We spend a good amount of our time training staff. To give you an idea, it takes about 400 employees to staff a year of program services and just seasonal work. That's outside of our regular FTEs. Those are constantly changing people. A lot of them are students, instructors, sports officials, coaches, those kinds of things. We also work, and this sounds really crazy, we prioritize things that are already funded. Now, why do I say that? It is, I would say on a weekly basis, we may get 3 to 5 requests for a new idea, a new project, a new initiative. Somebody else wants a bench, or to install a rock, or whatever it may be. And so we try and stay focused on those things that are already funded and have the largest impacts to the community. The most significant goal put forward by the Park Board is to update the PROST, and then, of course, applying both climate and equity and access is critical. Parks does have a $12 million budget. 77% is that is from tax revenues, predominantly or almost all Park District. 20% is from fees for services, which is actually very high. On a national level, City of Missoula Parks and Recreation is well above the typical norm for collecting fees for services. And we pride ourselves in trying to provide a very high quality service that people see value in, so that those who can afford to pay the fee are contributing so that we have more funds for scholarship and sliding fee scales for those who cannot afford. And so that sliding fee scale is critically important. We also have a contract with the county for maintenance of Fort Missoula Regional Park with 66% of the money going into personnel. From an organizational structure, we have 4 major functional work teams. One of those is in parks operations. I'm going to start there because obviously that's our biggest budget, is maintaining all of the lands and trees and trails and bridges. We actually have more bridges in the park system than Public Works has in the road system. To give you an idea, obviously they're much smaller, most of them. So under operations, we have ecosystem services, which is your conservation lands and your urban forest. We have developed parks and trails, which includes about 550 acres in parkland, all of the medians in the public right-of-way, as well as 22 miles of commuter trails. Going from there, we have recreation program services, and that's the aquatics programs, the out-of-school camps and programs, all of the sports and events at Fort Missoula Regional Park. And we also schedule and permit literally hundreds of events every single year throughout the park system, whether it be a family rental of a picnic shelter to a major festival, a market downtown, or the largest tournament of all time at Fort Missoula, which just seems like they keep getting bigger. We keep having more of them. Another one of our divisions is business. We, because of all those fees, so I mentioned we collect 20% of our total revenue in fees, but keep in mind most of those fees come in at $3, $5, $20, and maybe $100 at a time. And so we, in essence, operate multiple small businesses within Parks and Recreation. Things like the Crazy Creek Cafe at Splash, Montana are actually designed to be entrepreneurial in nature, or home plate at Fort Missoula Regional Park, to help lower the cost of the gate. Because what we really want is people to be able to play and swim together, and kids to learn how to swim and be safe in the water. And so we sell things like Dippin' Dots, which are really discretionary, to help generate revenue to keep fees low. And so we run concession stands and all kinds of things like that. And each time there's a major project like the pools or Fort Missoula Regional Park, we go through an entire process to develop a maintenance impact statement so we can understand the costs of operating the facility. We develop a business plan, a pro forma, just like any business would do, so that we know going in, before anybody approves a project going forward, we know what it's going to cost to maintain. We estimate what we're going to be able to gather as revenue. We know if there's a shortfall in that, what that will be, and that's how we operate. So very much of a business plan. Ryan oversees most of that work. And then we have a significant amount of customer service. We know, for example, Parks and Recreation receives more calls than any other entity in the city except 911 dispatch. And depending on the season, most of those calls are coming into the pools and for registrations, or they're coming into the urban forest. Our urban forester is one of the highest call centers in the city. And then we have projects and planning. So something that a lot of folks may not know is Parks does review all subdivisions, both major and minor. We're involved in developments that are coming through Montana Department of Transportation. We work closely with Missoula Redevelopment Agency, Public Works and Engineering, as well as having our own projects. So yes, we are working with everything from private developers and future parks to working with your neighborhood councils on installing a bench and a tree in a park. Some numbers, and you'll have this in your handout from Kalina, but there are over 700 acres of developed parks, 42 playgrounds, I mentioned bridges earlier, 45 of those, 22 miles actually of commuter trails, 2.4 million square feet of landscape medians. We also have 5,000 acres of conservation lands. You have 5,000 acres of conservation lands, 75 miles of dirt trails. Isn't it amazing that sometimes we think it's crowded? And we have 63 individual trailheads, 35,000 trees, and over 50 miles of sidewalks and commuter trails where we do snow removal. Sometimes I get asked if we're busy in the winter. The answer is yes. Recreational services, about 180,000 swims to those pools. A significant number. For those of you that have been in Missoula for a really long time, so that would date all the way back to about 2002 or 3. We used to have 2 swimming pools that were seasonal outdoor, and they were receiving 33,000 swims a year. These receive 180,000 swims a year, and they're subsidized proportionally by about the same amount, but now we're serving individuals of all abilities and all ages all year. So big value gain in that. We have over 55,000 hours of field rentals. 7,500 participants in out-of-school programming and 12,000 participant days in summer camps. What that means is we are providing out-of-school program services for kids and their families for about 1/3 of all elementary kids in the valley. We've become one of the largest, if not the largest, child care provider in the valley. This came out of the pandemic. Many child care centers ended up closing. And parks and the YMCA and Boys and Girls Club and a few others were the only places open, even while schools were closed for the majority of that year. And so we literally opened base camp with a old public library, set up a youth center, bought Chromebooks, and we were tutoring kids and hosting kids during the pandemic. We still have not met the demand for out of school program services. In fact, we could probably double the program to meet the demand. But it takes time to do that, and space, and quite frankly, Parks doesn't have any indoor facilities other than the natatorium at Parks. The scholarship amount is $130,000. Again, it's sliding fee scale. You self-select. We try to make it as easy as we possibly can for families to just say, hey, this is where we're at, and this is what we can afford to pay. And we find very, very rare, very little do people take advantage of that. What we find when we give people choices to pay, those who can pay are willing to pay more, and that helps us share the experiences. A few projects coming up. I've mentioned the Park Recreation Open Space and Trails Plan multiple times. It's so important because it's our future together and how we view our place for the next 10 to 15 years and how people recreate. Recreation is anything we do in our free time. Sometimes I hear people say, I don't recreate, or recreate is a bad word, or whatever they may be. I only fish or hunt or hike or bike. Recreation literally comes from the Latin word to recreate, to renew, to experience respite and relaxation and rest. And it is anything that happens in our discretionary time that is not harmful to ourselves, another person, or the environment. This is a very broad definition. In Canada, they call it leisure. But what we try to do is provide the residents of Missoula, along with those who visit Missoula, tourists and the guests you bring into your homes, an opportunity to experience the highest quality recreation, because we know it does renew people. It makes you happy. It fills us with endorphins. It makes us better people and better around those we live with. So that post does become very important, and we've talked multiple times about the climate aspects of that. Recently completed projects, those of you that are tennis fanatics are going to love that the Playfair tennis courts have been completely refurbished. We've done several sport courts, and we'll continue to do those in neighborhood parks. Redfern Park has a brand new playground thanks to a great partnership with the HOA out there. And finally, an ADA ramp at Bonner Van Shell, thanks largely to contributions from local businesses, so that all the members of our band can readily get up on the stage. We have some big projects. Northside Pedestrian Bridge is huge, a massive project. One of the ones I missed on here is we have multiple transportation alternative grants that are coming in to Missoula. So for a match of about $120,000 in Park District funds, we'll be bringing in just under $800,000 in federal transportation funds to maintain trails. Clark Fork River Restoration and Access, a very exciting project. For the first time ever, we will have ADA access down to the Clark Fork River from Caras Park. And there will be other access points like by Boone and Crockett on the south side of the river. We know that we have massive erosion problems between the University of Montana and McCormick Park along the river, particularly on the south bank. So the biggest component of these projects is literally about river restoration and ensuring that we preserve the Clark Fork River's habitat. We need cool water for the trout, and we need a clean running water for us to enjoy it. It's one of downtown Missoula's greatest economic benefits, and it's one of the most important, the riverways, including the Rattlesnake Creek, is one of the most important assets in this valley for our indigenous community members, and so we spend a lot of time focused on making sure our waterways are running clean, working with stormwater and the many entities that work around clean water. Second part of that will be a West Broadway Clark Fork River Corridor project. We're doing that one in partnership with MRA, looking at the West Broadway Island, the trestle, closure of the Flynn Lowney ditch, restoration of those areas, including Southside Lions and the island. Finally, Bear Tracks Underbridge is being renewed in partnership with the Downtown Association and Downtown Partnership. And that will evolve into Big Art on Northwest Energy substation at Patty, where the Clark Fork Market goes, and moving back to that site. And then the RAISE SAM grant. RAISE is Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, Safety and Mobility Project, working with Macy and MRA and Public Works and Parking Commission. Super exciting project. Front Main will be two-way, which is good for business. We're working really hard to invest in urban trees in that area. It'll include a widening of Ron's River Trail, which is on the north bank from, trying to remember, I think it's from at least Russell, if not the California Street Bridge, all the way to Madison Street. And so if you've been down in Caras Park, and you'll see where the mound was removed and replaced it with an infiltration gallery, and now we can see several hundred more people or use the play space. We also widen that trail to about 18 feet. And it feels like a promenade. Well, that's going to happen all along the river in the core of the downtown. That trail's become so busy. Trails, for example, like the Milwaukee on the other side, the river is also part of the Great American Rail Trail, which is a trail that will go from Washington, D.C. to Seattle, Washington. It's about 60% complete across the nation. It'll be traveling through Montana. We have a partnership with 6 different counties to see that trail through here. We know that we have as much use on trails like the Milwaukee Guard and the Ron's River Trail and Bitterroot Trail as many of our collector streets. When we're working with the University of Montana, we're finding that almost 1/5 of the access, presence on how you arrive on campus is coming through that trail. So kudos to Missoulians for using their trail system. One of the most exciting projects for me out of the RAISE SAM project is a ramp that will come off of Bear Tracks Bridge on the east side directly into East Caras Park, where the gathering or the fish, or the returnings, the fish are. And what a great, it was one of the best views of the Clark Fork River in all time. Finally, a couple of closing slides. We do have a license plate, so this is my very forward and direct sales ad to you. This helps us generate money to help those individuals in our community who do not have the resources to do the things they want to do, like have a pass at Splash. So we pay the way through things like this, and are able to provide that $130,000. This pays for a small part of it, but it's an important part. And obviously countless smiles, kids learning to swim, adults, older adults walking together. We have numerous groups that meet for water exercise or to walk in the morning from the park. People playing sports together, families playing together. Those are the things that keep our community going. All those festivals and events. I love the stories of, it's really hard to have road rage on the trail when I meet somebody. So that is a quick summary of what Parks and Recreation is all about. And then if you would be so wonderful, we'll do some Q&A. And then we're going to set up after the Q&A to do an exercise around planning with pros. So we brought some maps for you. Ryan's going to run through a series of pro slides. How about we do Q&A just on parks, how it operates, budget, and those kinds of things. And I'm going to turn over to Ryan, so we're going to do a fun exercise to close out your evening. You can tell us about what you want to see in your future at parks. Any questions?
Where's your office?
We have offices at McCormick Park inside Occurrence, across the street at 100 Hickory by the Montana Natural History Center, and out at Fort Missoula Regional Park. Yes?
I was curious what you would define as walking distance. You mentioned each neighborhood having
Yes.
within walking distance.
So we look at walking distance as a approximate half mile. It's 10 to 12 minutes for a parent with a young child, or for somebody who may have mobility limitations or challenges, and they can still walk there, in essence, unimpeded, so you don't have to jump over a railroad track, swim a river, or cross a major street.
Does that also then include like ADA accessible sidewalks?
It does, and we work really closely with the transportation staff, because they have sidewalks, and they work with the transit staff on busing. So when you look at transportation plans, like the long-range transportation plan, it's the entire valley and providers that provide any level of mobility. And so the way we really try to think about it across the city is we want to move people, including people who cannot drive a car for any number of reasons. They might be too little, too young, don't have the resources, can't see, whatever that is. And we can move cargo, because we know we have to move cargo for all kinds of good reasons, right? And so when we think about just moving those two things, it makes multimodal transit work really, really well. And the ADA is a significant part of that, largely why I'm so excited about the ramp that's going to come off Bear Tracks, because there's not a good access down to the park system for individuals with disabilities. It's very difficult. Thank you. And that's a long evening doing this. And if you're like me, you're like kind of hour number 12 of today. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to set us up, tell us a little bit more about Prost, and set us up.
Thanks, Donna. Ryan Applegate, Deputy Director at Parks. I'm going to give just a very brief introduction to our park recreation, open space, and trails planning effort. We're about, I think, 3 months into this effort, and as Donna mentioned, we have a master park plan from 2004. It was meant to guide our park system for 20 years, and we are now in 2024. And so it's time to update this, and we are working with a consultant, called Blue Point Consulting, to help us do this. and really getting ready to kick off our needs and inventory analysis and analyze our gaps in services and do public input and public process around how we can analyze our gaps in services, our deficiencies, and really, I think, dig in a little bit more to the question as well that was asked about what is a 10-minute walk to a park, or what is that? What are the barriers? And really with kind of take some strides using some technology that may have advanced in the last 20 years for GIS and things of that to really kind of inventory our system and really look at how parks can play the role that they need to into our future. 20 years ago, I think we were planning based on kind of where the sewer connections were and really kind of sprawling out more. We have much more of an inward growth policy now. What does that mean to our park system? What does that mean to our park system as we become more of a small city as compared to a big town? I think, I use that analogy some in being here for a little while, for around 20 years, is that how do we do that as a community and how do we form that together? So what is our parks plan? We're going to inventory and analyze our gaps, and we're going to move to a process of establishing visions and goals and objectives for our next 10 to 15 years through parks. Where do we want to guide ourselves? How can the park system help with that? Then we're going to do something that has maybe a trophy or a toast of wine that I don't really know. Now we're going to look at other planning processes, and like Donna mentioned, this is going to be a part of the growth policy, the adopted plan under the growth policy. So it's going to move together with a lot of other planning processes. And we want all of those to be speaking to each other and be moving us forward. Our Missoula growth policy is happening right now as well, and that's being updated right now. This plan will be a subset of that, so they need to be using the same information. We want an innovative plan that documents, and we think we rely on our community for that innovation. And so that's why that public input is very, very valuable. And then we want to do it through our strategic planning and our lenses of climate, equity, and housing. And then we want it to be something that we can actually implement at the end of the day. And so generally, over the next, where it's an 18-month-long process total, we're at the probably beginning third of it. And like I said, going into that inventory and analyzing gaps, and that's what our activity is about today. Here's our project timeline. Oh, that sounds better. We're in the fall of 23, winter of 23-24. We're gathering data. We're looking at existing conditions. We're going to have an engagement window through the spring where we're going to be going out to a lot of mobile listening sessions. We'll be at parks. We'll be at events. We'll be at our partners' sites. We're also, on our next slide, we'll start to promote on March 5th, which is coming up really soon, is our first large public open house at the library. Through the summers, we'll be starting to develop that plan and come back to say, hey, did we get it right in the fall? Can we get another listening session? This is where you're thinking you're telling us and wanting us to point. Are we listening? And then we'll be going through recommendations through next winter with an adopted plan, hopefully in the spring of 2025. So this is that public open house number 1. Will be Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. You'll hopefully see this starting this week on our social media, starting this week on kind of seeing that word. Please spread the word. And also our survey, which is our community needs assessment survey, our community survey will be going online. And tonight, and with the activity that we're going to do, we're going to ask for some feedback on that survey. So that's Prost in general. Questions related to that planning, or before we jump into, we're going to probably ask you to get up put some maps down, and then we'll go into our activity. Yes, sir.
Curious if the input that you're given, when you actually go to make the decisions with that in the park decision-making processes of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks, David. So what we'll do is as we gather data and do the surveys, and there will also be a statistically valid survey managed by the university, we then share that information with you and all the things we heard from Leslie. That will be compared to peer cities and National Recreation and Park Standards, because that's our industry that we work with, and bring back what we think we heard from you, along with all this comparative analysis, and then ask for input again. At that point, a draft plan is written, and then we come back to the community and say, does this reflect what you thought it should? And each time we're showing you the data we picked up and gained, so that you can also see that. Because we all tend to, or most of us tend to think that everybody else thinks like me, and sometimes it's surprising when we find out not everybody thinks like me. And so we try and share that with you, so you know that, oh wow. Now that doesn't mean, when you think about this, you know, if 8% of our population does something, that's a big percent. So when we look at recreation program services going down to even maybe 4% of people skateboard, we still have a skateboard facility. And so it's really about trying to listen to what are the needs of the community. So I hope that answers how all the way through. Parks are for people, so it's really important that people get what they need out of it. When we do neighborhood park designs, the neighborhood designs their park. And we give you the tools to do that. And we'll be doing that hopefully on the north side and west side. So,
Okay, so yeah, right here. So we have two activities. We're going to ask you, we have 3 larger maps. We have some post-it notes. Those maps identify kind of our neighborhood parks, our community parks, our regional parks. There's a pretty good idea of our open space lands, our trails. And we're going to give you some post-it notes. We're going to ask you to tell us how you use the parks. Tell us what you like about the parks. Tell us what you don't like about the parks. On those post-it notes, use it as a conversation. You can put the post-it note near a place that you're trying to identify, or it can be more of a general comment. So that's one activity that's going to be going on. And I said we were going to ask for some feedback on our surveys. We also have 15 copies of questions we are considering posing on our community survey. And they're questions that need a lot of answer choices. And so we want you all to kind of think about the questions, pick 1 or 2 of them, and say, what are the answer choices I would propose? One of them might be, I'll just tell you what one is. What are your top reasons for visiting Missoula Parks and Recreation, Parks and Trails, and open spaces in Missoula? Or Missoula Parks and Recreation has limited funds. Please help us prioritize how these funds should be allocated. Like, should we maintain? Should we acquire more? Should we maintain what we have? Should we do more of what we have? What kind of answer choices do you all think we should be putting on the survey that is going out? So just 1 or 2. So to start, I think we will need to pair up in groups of 10. Let's have 1 map. Would you mind if this table hosts a map? Is that okay? Can I ask you to maybe clear up? And the maps are from our 3x4 plotter. And we have 3 people here. So maybe these groups here, these tables here, can join that group. And let's try, how about, who has table? Oh, and would maybe these group people here go up front by where Donna is? And we have some sticky notes up there, and just have a conversation with each other. And then I will start bringing around these. And then maybe we have one more. How about this table here? Could this table host a map? That would be wonderful wonderful too. Yeah, how about right here? And then if you haven't joined, and let's try to make the groups pretty even. So I'm asking you if you wouldn't mind and are able to stand up, move around a little bit, and join the groups around the maps. Okay, that would be wonderful. And then each table should get sticky notes, and we have a bunch of writing utensils to write on there. And we could prompt, you could think about it, you could talk about it on your own, and just tell us what you think about parks. Now, while you're doing that, I have one other thing to complicate everything. If I could have attention just for one more second, and then I'll set you free. Trying it? If you can hear me, touch your nose, because I am a programmer. Thank you. So I'm going to ask the groups now to self-select into 2 groups. Okay, so we're in 3 large groups, and I'm going to hand out to each group maybe 4 of these questions, and I'm going to ask half of the group to spend about, I think we have maybe 6 minutes thinking about the questions. If you could hand those out to half of your group there, and then think about the questions and write down some answer choices for us. Maybe give us some input on the questions, and half of the other group work on the map, writing your post-it note suggestions down, writing how you do, and then we'll switch, okay? And then we'll switch, and we'll have half of the group that was doing the question answer. We'll have you all start doing the map exercise. And then, if we have time, we'll share some of that out. Share what we learned. The question exercise is set up as a think, pair, share. So if you want to do it that way, that would be lovely in the direction you're on. What do you guys think? That was a little complicated, I know. Do you think we can do it though? Yeah? Here is questions for this group over here.
Yeah.
No, on the map.
That way.
I just always have to remember that the M is